I was the fish out of the water, even though that I could talk about food, having being given a hosting position in one of the biggest shows in Australia was just the most stressful time of my life, to be honest with you. The first series of my kitchen was I couldn't sleep. I was stressed.
This is The Crackling. I'm Anthony Huckstep. They say fame can change people. But what is fame? And what image does it present? The reality is, we only really get glimpses of famous people. And yet, that forms the basis of how we judge them. The notion of celebrity chef has become a driving force on television. But for most that make a crust in the limelight, it came after years of hard work learning their craft. Who is Manu Feildel? Well, Manu, you're known as a celebrity chef and one of Australia's most well-known, but a lot of people might not know that you also were the head chef of a 3-hat restaurant, which is the highest accolade you can receive in Australia.
Yes, that's right. It's funny how people forget things like this, It's like going to the top of Mount Everest, but it seems to be. It's funny because it was an amazing part of my life, but it seems to be such a long time ago and such a different life ago as well.
Well, let's go back a little bit before we look at what's happening now. Take us back to France. What was it like? What was food like in your family, and how important was it to the center of your family?
I think food was everything, and I didn't know how lucky I was as a kid, I suppose, because I thought every French family were as lucky as I was. Mum was a great home cook because her mum was a great home cook. My dad was a chef, and my mum's dad was a chef as well. My mum's granddad was a pastry chef. So, and my uncle is a charcutier, so he's been making, charcuterie all his life and gold medals of black pudding and so on. So, food for me, and funny, I never thought of becoming a chef until I had to really. But for me, what food was always in my life, and I never remember pushing a plate away from me, saying I don't like that or I don't want that. Food was. It's always been the center of my life.
Is there any dishes from your childhood that you have fond memories of?
I've got a whole book of it. My I think my first cookbook was dedicated to the typical French food of what I was brought up with. But yeah, I mean, I suppose firstly I need to remind everyone that you know. Good food doesn't have to be expensive, by the way. So I wasn't born in a family with a lot of money and could drink the best wine and eat the most expensive ingredients. What we had was humble ingredients, just cooked very well. And that's what people make mistake of. Fine dining is not necessarily expensive. Fine dining for me is it's just good food, just cooked very well. We're middle class, single mother, just brought up, cooking some great food. So that was it for us.
You mentioned that you had to become a chef, which is an interesting way to phrase it. Can you tell us how you got into the industry?
Um, I was a clown at school. I wasn't pretty much listening to any of the teachers, and not because I was stupid, just because I was uninterested. And by the age of 15, uh, mom just didn't know what to do with me anymore. My parents were divorced. My dad used to own a restaurant at the time, and she pretty much sent me to my dad and say, "Go and work with your dad for a while and we'll see where it takes you, I suppose." And Anthony, I can tell you, the first day I walked into the kitchen, that was it. I knew that's what I wanted to do. I knew because because it just made sense. The dots connected in me loving food and me being brought up around food. Then suddenly I ended up in the kitchen, and it felt great, and from the lazy student at school, I became a really hard worker straight away. Doing over 16 hours a day. I wasn't scared of it. I wasn't afraid of it. And the more time I would spend in the kitchen, the better it was for me.
You applied your trade in Europe for a little while and ended up in Australia. What was it like in those early stages of your career in Europe before you came down here?
So I moved. I did my apprenticeship from the age of 15 to 18 in France, which the last 2 years of my apprenticeship was probably the hardest part of the apprenticeship. It was tough. I had a really moody and alcoholic head chef that I was stuck with for 2 years, and so a lot of physical and verbal abuse, but also taught me everything he knew about French food. So it was kind of balancing things out, I suppose, at the time. And then left to England. My cousin was a chef. My cousin is 3 years older than me, I think, and he was already working in London. And he finished his contract in London and gave me a call and said, I'm leaving London. Do you want to take my job?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why not?" So I didn't speak a word of English at the time. I had a £300 in my pocket, and a job, and that was the second part of my apprenticeship. This time it was the apprenticeship of life. That was again really really tough the first year, but I survived, and then I just got on with working in London for 8 years. And then after 8 years, I was 26 years old by then. Decided to. I worked with a lot of Aussies and Kiwis and South Africans in London. So I just got painted an amazing picture of what Australia was about, and decided to take my backpack and come to Australia. And the rest is history, I suppose.
You mentioned that your time in London, which is 8 years, was your apprenticeship of life. What did you take from that time?
Again, like I was a commis chef at the Cafe Royal in Piccadilly Circus, and that was a nine-floor business. So there was a kitchen on every floor, banquets and fine dining cafes and brasseries, and you name it. So that was an amazing, amazing place to be. But the head chef was just, excuse my French, but it's just an asshole, a German guy, and just make us work harder than we should, really. But again, it's just I don't regret any of this time, to be honest with you, because it makes you tougher, it makes you strong, and it makes you deal with anything in the future, I suppose. But I was tough as well, and but again, by the age of 22 years old, I was running a restaurant. So I started early. But in a space of 7 years, I was able to run one of the best seafood restaurants in London, which is called Live Bait. And by 1998, we were nominated best one of the best seafood restaurants. So, work hard pays off, I suppose, and I suppose working hard is one thing, having a passion is another. And I think most chefs have the passion, and you need to have the passion because before you make money in this business, it takes years.
You had these expectations of what Australia would be like before you came here because of the people you worked with. What was it like when you first got here? Was it a shock, the food culture here, or how did you feel about it?
Yes, actually, it was a shock indeed, to be honest with you. So my last 3 years in London was working in a seafood restaurant, which I really, really loved to be, to have something special, I suppose. specialize in seafood, and in Europe you've got seafood from everywhere: Spain, France, Scotland, from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic. So it's amazing array of seafood. So when I came here, knowing I was on a huge island, I was hoping to be working in a seafood restaurant again, and I couldn't find a place that I was attracted to. I mean, I remember the seafood platters in Melbourne 20 years ago was deep fried fish, and defrosted oysters, and it was just like I was shocked. I was like, "What the heck's going on?" um, until I found a job with Michael Bakash, who used to have two fees in North Carlton, and his knowledge of food wasn't huge, but his understanding about seafood was epic, and I really loved working with him because of the food. He was a nutcase as well, by the way, but yeah, I've never seen so much fresh seafood coming from Melbourne. It was amazing. Like everything was live and fresh, and it was beautiful. Unfortunately, I didn't fall in love with Melbourne at the time, so I came to visit a friend in Sydney, which was a huge eye opening to me, because Sydney, it was the city that was got painted to me: blue sky, sunshine. I remember arriving at Central Station on a bus, and I walked down George Street all the way down to the Opera House on the bridge. As I said, blue sky, sunshine, and I'm like, oh my god, this is it. This is Australia. This is where I want to be. So I stayed in Sydney, and started working at Hugo's in Bondi.
Oh, wow. How was that? That was quite a huge social place for so many in Sydney at that time. What was that experience like?
My I had the best time of my life. I was 26 years old. The ocean was looking at me. Uh, Again, the weather was amazing. The people were fantastic. We were all in our 20s, so it was party central, and working hard as well. And the reason why the guys at Hugo's gave me a job is because they were opening Hugo's Lounge in King's Cross 6 months later, and they had never seen a CV like mine before. So they were very excited to have a French dude, taking over the restaurant, I suppose.
We briefly touched on the fact that you were at a three hat restaurant in Bilson's. What was it like working with the late Tony Bilson and creating that restaurant?
Wow, how long have you got? It was full on, mate. It was just the first year was really, really tough in a way that Tony was an amazing chef. Like I probably one of the best chef I've ever worked with, I suppose, and because of his knowledge and his passion and his love of French food, and he was a dreamer though. He had big dreams, but he was a bad businessman at the same time. So we the first year was very, very rocky. Couldn't pay the bills, so most of the time couldn't get the supplies from the suppliers, and so on. But we pulled through, and on the second year of opening, we had two hats, which was amazing. And on the third year, we received that third hat and kept the three hats for 3 years in a row, which was the reason why I stayed behind. But physically, mentally draining, because when you get two hats, it's great. When you get three, it's amazing. But to keep three hats for such a long time, it's draining, because you have to be on top of it every minute, every day, every week, every month. And But we had a good team, and yeah, it probably the best part of time of my life. I remember that for forever.
Can you tell us about some of the dishes or even pork dishes that start on that menu?
Yeah, I think we try to stay, I suppose, traditional in a way, but being a little bit ahead of the time. But now the cuisine is different. Now it's like very very modern. But when we started Wilson, the modern food was just starting to pop in. So we were still a little bit traditional in a way. But I mean, the odd pressed. Suckling pig, crispy skin, black pudding, apple puree, beautiful pork jus with truffle in it. Like simple but technically precise and correct and delicious, But pig strauders, we used to braise pig strauders overnight. Then we used to peel gently the gelatin skin away from the bone. Then we used to make a pork stuffing and pipe the pork stuffing in. Then roll the pig strauder back together, wrapped in crepinets, and then set and then cut and then fried. It was just like technically took us for days to make those type of dishes, but absolutely delicious, man. And nobody would care about doing this anymore because it takes too long.
You briefly mentioned a part of a dish, the pork jus, and I remember that from those times. And you've made a name for yourself about sauce being so integral on a dish to bring it together. How tough was it creating that pork jus? Can you take us through that?
Yeah, man, we used to make our stocks ourselves, and I'm saying this because again, it's not a lot of restaurants do this anymore, except the top restaurants, I suppose. But the type of bone you're using, the type of the 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 time it takes to reduce to a beautiful demi-glace, and it's got to have the balance of sweetness, and it can't be too bitter. It needs to be sticky from the gelatin of the pork and all of this. Using pig strauders and breast bones and all of that, and it's just a knowledge and also caring about the results and and that's what I love about sauce, mate, is because it takes so long to produce, but the end result, it's got so many layers. It's outstanding.
Yeah, I'm with you. It can really bring a dish together and even be the star of it.
That's right, 100%.
You ended up leaving Bilson's and opening in Paddington with a really successful French bistro. What was it like running your own business for the first time like that?
It was quite amazing actually, because I mean, to be honest with you, I was running Bilson, even though the Bilson wasn't mine. I was running it like it was mine. And I've always worked that way. You've got to be on top of the food cost and the staff cost and writing the menus and hiring and firing the staff. So it's kind of it's kind of the same, except that suddenly you have to pay the bills. um, but I remember I've joined L'Etoile when it was already open. So the Yannick, who used to own L'Etoile, had started L'Etoile and was heavily in debts. So he kind of called me and said, "I need you to come and help," and sort me out. And I didn't. I just did what I did. I did very. I started with doing very basic bistro French foods, the real classic, you know, onion soup and souffles and so on. And it just kind of went crazy straight away. And in the space of the first 6 months, my business partner pretty much repaid most of his debts, and we just continue on, and it just went on and on and on, and then unfortunately, you know. Partnership don't always work, and we kind of split up out from that after that.
You've become one of Australia's leading food communicators on television. What was it like in the early days when you first started in that medium? Was it nerve-wracking for you?
Oh, like more than nerve wracking, because I was the fish out of the water, even though that I could talk about food, having being given a hosting position in one of the biggest shows in Australia was just the most stressful time of my life, to be honest with you. The first series of my kitchen roll was, I couldn't sleep. I was stressed. I like, you've got cameras, you've got crew, you've got hundreds of people listening to you and watching you, and it's it's quite stressful. And it took me a couple of years to feel relaxed with it, I suppose. And now it is a job. It's my job. It's what I do. But it was a brand new job at the time, and it was tough. But I also loved it, and I still love it. And I'm so happy that I've got two different careers that could merge together and put a smile on my face. I love what I do, so it's just not hard work anymore.
Over the years, you've had to balance the world of celebrity and chefing and owning restaurants and having that spotlight on your personal life as well. What's it like having so much focus on sort of your personal life while you're trying to run restaurants or be a food communicator?
Well, when everything's working, it's bloody fantastic. When the restaurants are full, brilliant. You are successful on TV, brilliant. Uh, Everything goes well at home, brilliant. But to have the three together working brilliantly, it's near impossible. There's always one failure, and I've always put it like having a four burner stove, and you've got, let's think that you've got four flames going at the same time and there's not enough gas. It's kind of it can work like this. So yeah, being I suppose what they call a celebrity is double-edged sword, because it helps you in a way in your business, but it's a double-edged sword in a way that people expect so much more from you. And that's the tough part of it. You've got to always be on top of everything. So it's been tough. Celebrity or success doesn't happen without failures. So it's been tough, and I've been criticized a lot, and but I also been loved a lot by the public and so on. So it's I think it's just hard to juggle, but you have to, and it is what it is.
Do you miss the energy of the kitchen and restaurants? And how do you compare that sort of energy rush that you would get in the entertainment industry compared to the restaurant industry?
I miss it 150%. I miss it a lot. I miss it, but I also know that where it is at the moment, I'm happy that I'm not in it. Because it'd be a very difficult thing to deal with, but I miss it. I'd love. I'd said I would never have a restaurant again because it's tough, but I kind of inside. I'd love to. I'd love to. I love the service time. I love the rush of cooking. I love the talking to the customers and put a smile on their faces, and the noise that restaurants makes. And I love all of that. That's what I was born to be doing. But my life took me a different path, and I had to make a choice. Between the entertainment or the restaurants. You can't do both. It's just too tough. And there's a lot of example of people that have been trying to do it, and it's hard. You have to choose one or the other. But I can compare. It's like being on a stage at the theater, I suppose. As an actor or singer, it's like a show. When you run a restaurant, every night it's a new show.
Well, it's not just television that you've been on. You're in a movie as well as a French chef. What was that like?
But that was the weirdest thing ever, that someone came up to me, a TV, a movie director offered me to have a go at it. I was just like, kind of, why? I've never studied, acting of any kind. But the guy just followed me and thought I was charismatic and that I would be able to pull it off. And I mean, I don't think it was a huge success, but personally, it was for me, because I got given the chance to, to be on the big screen, I suppose, and it was great. It was fantastic, and working alongside Shane Jacobson, I was laughing my head off on daily basis. So again, it wasn't really like working; it was just being on set, just hanging out with some mates.
Do you do much cooking these days? Who's the person that cooks the most at home?
Oh, it's Clarissa. My wife does. She's an amazing home cook. She's background is Malaysian, Chinese, Sri Lankan, and she can cook those three cuisines. And now she starts cooking even some European dishes as well. And she just loves it. She just does it. It's this Asian mentality of they don't necessarily give you a big hug, but they give you a big plate of food. That's the way they do it. And yes, I do maybe 30% of the cooking. She probably do about 70%. Um, and I'm happy with that. I love cooking, but I love eating as well, so it doesn't bother me.
When you do get a chance to get on the pans, what sort of cuts of pork and techniques do you like to sort of do at home?
Yeah, a whole lot. Obviously, at home, it's nice to do the roasts. I love I think the best part of the pork that people will agree with me is the pork belly. Like a beautiful, crispy skin pork belly, juicy, well seasoned with a good crunch. It's it's absolutely delicious. And you can play with different spices with that. Um, but I love a good pork cutlet, a simple pork cutlet on the bone. With you can make it a schnitzel out of it with a beautiful mustard sauce. Um, yeah, I mean, at home we don't necessarily cook difficult dishes either, and that's why my sauce range is there for, is to help people to have a beautiful cut of pork of any kind. You know what I love as well is the pork neck. I think pork neck is fantastic for to make a roast, to make a steak, to make a braise. Um, I love these cuts very much because it's very multifaceted, I suppose, in different kind of cooking techniques. And what we do as well is the Chinese pork loin as well. What do you call it? Escapes my mind now. Um, um, we tried it. Yeah, the Chinese pork loin that they do in the raid. Oh man, I forgot. It's gonna come back to me. But we did that sous vide the other day. We've got a Oh, chai su, sorry, yeah, exactly. Thank you so much. We did that sous vide the other day because the first time we did it, it came out a bit dry. And then Clarissa said, why don't we try it sous vide? And it worked pretty good, nice and moist, and then caramelize it under the grill afterwards with the sugar. It's just yummy.
Well, is there a secret? I know you just mentioned the sous vide, but for char siu, does it need to marinate for a particular amount of time to get right?
Yeah, like I mean, what you buy in the shops here, I think they put a bit of coloring into it. That's why it becomes really red. But traditionally, it's beautiful caramelized, brown caramelized outside, and you need to marinate it for a while. So obviously you get all the flavors going through. But yeah, as long as you keep it nice and juicy on the inside and crispy on the inside, it's phew, yeah, delicious.
Now, you mentioned the pork belly earlier, and I tend to agree with you. It is very popular, but you did sort of glaze over how you would cook it, and you were very quick about it. But that crackling is so important, and keeping that meat tender. Do you have any tips or techniques that you use to get them right?
It's funny. It's the question that I've been asked many times, and there's different techniques actually that I've tried. The one thing that you need to do without failure is to actually, if you buy a pork belly that is been into a plastic wrap, just unwrap it. And then dry it with a paper towel and leave it in your fridge uncovered overnight, and that would dry the skin out, especially if the pork's been frozen for some reason, because it's a big country here, and sometimes pork or meat gets frozen in transit. So yeah, get your pork belly out in the fridge uncovered to dry the skin out, and then you score it obviously, and then rub. I learned a technique where you can rub a bit of vinegar as well on top of it. That makes the skin dry even quicker. And then you score it, and then you put your seasoning in there. So I love using salt and pepper, of course, and I love using fennel seeds into that. And then you really rub it in, and either you put your oven full blast on the grill to really crackle the skin first, and then reduce the heat, and then cook it for a lot longer after that. Or there's also the way of using a frying pan and frying the skin upside down on the pan first, so you get the bubble happening, and then flip it over and finish it in the oven. So there's a couple of techniques like this, but the drying is the most important.
Wow. Wow, you're making me hungry. Well, I've always got time for pork belly. Manu, it's been so great to catch up with you and hear your life journey. Look forward to seeing what you do next. Maybe it's another film or two.
Perhaps, we never know. I'm never surprised what kind of phone call I get.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us on The Crackling, and we'll talk again soon.
All right, cheers, brother.
This is The Crackling, a Deep in the Weeds production in partnership with PorkStar. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we catch up with some of Australia's best chefs and pork producers to discover what makes Australian pork so special.